When my son left the house that morning, he did not slam the door. He did not shout. He did not argue. He did not even look back. He simply picked up his bag, walked past me, and closed the door gently behind him. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. I stood in the kitchen holding the cup of tea I had just made for him, steam still rising, his favorite cup, the one with the small blue flowers around the rim. I had warmed the milk the way he liked it, not too hot, just enough. He didn't drink it. I told myself he would come back by dinner. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe he was upset. Maybe I had said something wrong the night before. But night came. And then another morning. And then silence. After everything I gave him, he left without saying goodbye. And I still don't know which part hurts more, the leaving or the silence. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old. I have only one child, my son Daniel. For most of my life, it was just the two of us. Daniel was born on a rainy afternoon in October. I still remember the sound of the rain hitting the hospital window. I was 27, afraid, alone. His father left before Daniel was even born. He said he was not ready. He said he needed freedom. I never heard from him again. So I learned how to be both mother and father. I worked at a small grocery store during the day. At night, I cleaned offices downtown. I slept 4 or 5 hours at most, but I never complained. Because every time I looked at Daniel sleeping in his small crib, I felt strong again. He was a quiet child, gentle, thoughtful. He used to follow me around the kitchen, holding onto the edge of my skirt. "Mom," he would say, "when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house." I would laugh. "I don't need a big house, I just need you." And I meant it. We did not have much money. Birthdays were simple, sometimes just a small cake and a candle. Christmas gifts were modest, but there was always warmth in our home, always laughter. At night, I would sit beside his bed and read stories to him, even when I was tired, even when my feet hurt so badly I could barely stand. Because I knew one day he would grow up, and those nights would end. Daniel was a good student, not the top of his class, but hardworking, responsible. He never caused trouble. Teachers liked him, neighbors trusted him. When he was 16, he got his first part-time job at a hardware store. He handed me his first paycheck and said, "This is for you." I pushed it back into his hand. "No," I told him, "save it for your future." I always wanted him to have more than I did. When he got accepted into college, I cried in the kitchen where he could not see me. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. So very proud. He studied business. He worked part-time while studying. He rarely asked me for money. Sometimes I would quietly put a little cash in his jacket pocket anyway. He would pretend not to notice. After graduation, he found a job in the city. It was not perfect, but it was steady. He began wearing suits. He spoke about meetings and projects. I did not understand everything he said, but I nodded and smiled. My little boy was becoming a man. And then one evening, he brought her home. Her name was Claire. Claire was beautiful, polished, confident. She wore soft perfume and spoke gently, but there was something careful in her eyes, something measured. I welcomed her warmly. "Any woman my son loves is welcome in my home," I told her. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. At first, everything seemed fine. They visited every Sunday for dinner. I cooked Daniel's favorites, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Claire would compliment the food politely. "It's lovely," she would say. But she never asked for seconds. Sometimes I would catch her looking around the house, at the old furniture, at the faded curtains, at the small cracks in the wall near the window. And I would suddenly feel small. One evening, I overheard her whispering to Daniel in the living room. "It's just very modest," she said softly. Modest. That word stayed with me. Daniel laughed lightly. "It's home." I held on to that sentence. It's home. Months passed. Then one night, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table. "We're getting married," he said. I felt my heart swell. I reached across the table and held his hand. "I'm so happy for you." And I was, truly. But something changed after that. Claire began making suggestions. "Maybe after the wedding, you two should find your own place," she told Daniel one afternoon while I was washing dishes nearby. I froze. Daniel hesitated. Mom lives here. Claire's voice stayed calm. Of course, but you're starting your own life now. Starting your own life. As if I had been something temporary. Daniel didn't answer. I told myself not to be sensitive. Young couples need space. That is normal. So I made a decision, before anyone could ask me. I offered to move into the small spare room downstairs. It used to be storage. I cleaned it myself, painted the walls a soft cream color, put a small bed inside. This way, I said cheerfully, you'll have the upstairs. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Mom, you don't have to. I want to, I insisted. Claire smiled that careful smile again. The wedding was simple, beautiful. I wore a pale blue dress. I cried when Daniel said his vows. After the wedding, they moved into the house permanently. At first, I tried very hard not to interfere. I stayed in my small room downstairs most evenings. I kept the television volume low. I asked before cooking large meals. I folded their laundry only when asked. Still, I began to feel like a guest in my own home. One night, I heard them arguing upstairs. You're always with her, Claire said sharply. She's my mother, Daniel replied. I know that, but we need boundaries. Boundaries. The word echoed through the ceiling. The next morning at breakfast, everything was quiet, too quiet. Daniel avoided my eyes. Claire stirred her coffee slowly. I pretended not to notice. Weeks passed like that, small tensions, soft words, careful smiles. Daniel started coming home later from work. Claire became more distant. She no longer joined me in the kitchen. Sunday dinners disappeared. One afternoon, Claire knocked on my downstairs door. Can we talk? She asked. Her voice was calm, but firm. I nodded. She sat across from me, hands folded neatly in her lap. I think it would be healthier, she said carefully, if you considered finding a place of your own. The room felt smaller. This is my home, I replied gently. She smiled politely. Of course, but Daniel and I need privacy, space to grow. Grow. I looked at her and realized something quietly painful. She did not see me as family. She saw me as an obstacle. That night, I did not sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe. The pipes, the soft hum of the refrigerator upstairs, the sound of my son walking across the floor. I wondered when everything had shifted. I wondered if love could quietly turn into distance without anyone noticing. The next morning, I made Daniel his tea like always. And that was the morning he walked past me, picked up his bag, and left without saying goodbye. After Daniel walked out that morning without drinking his tea, I told myself it meant nothing. People leave for work every day. People forget to say goodbye. People get distracted. But a mother knows. There was something different in the way he avoided my eyes. Something final in the way his fingers tightened around the strap of his bag. That evening, he came home late, later than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a book open in front of me, though I had not turned the page in over an hour. I heard the key in the door, the soft click, the careful footsteps. He paused when he saw me. Hi, Mom, he said. His voice was polite. Polite. Not warm, not tired, just polite. Hello, sweetheart, I replied gently. Long day. Yeah, just busy. Claire appeared behind him. She did not look at me directly. We ate out, she said quickly, as if explaining something before I could ask. So don't worry about dinner. I had already cleaned the kitchen. The food I made earlier was still in the refrigerator. I see, I said softly. They went upstairs. I stayed seated for a long time. That night, I realized something small but painful. They were living their life above me, and I was living below them. Same house. Different worlds fade into early morning light through the kitchen window. Soft piano begins. The distance did not come all at once. It grew quietly, like a crack in glass that slowly spreads. Claire stopped asking how my day was. Daniel stopped sharing stories about work. Their laughter upstairs became softer, like they were careful not to let it travel downstairs. One Sunday, I decided to make dinner anyway. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. When I called upstairs, Claire answered. We have plans, she said. We're meeting friends. I nodded, though she could not see me. Of course, I replied. After they left, I sat alone at the table. 3 plates, 3 glasses. I slowly put 2 plates back into the cupboard. That was the first time I felt truly alone inside my own home. A week later, Daniel knocked on my downstairs door. He rarely did that. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was heavy. I felt my heart tighten, but I smiled. Of course. He sat on the edge of the small chair near my bed. He did not look at me at first. He stared at his hands. "Claire feels uncomfortable," he began. I waited. "She thinks we need more privacy." I swallowed gently. "You have privacy." He shook his head. "It's not just that. She feels like we're still children, living with a parent." I let out a small breath. "You are my child," I said quietly. "I know, Mom." His voice cracked slightly. "But I'm also her husband." There it was. Not angry. Not cruel. Just truth. "I don't want to hurt you," he continued. "But we've been thinking about maybe selling the house." The room felt very still. "Selling," I repeated. "It would help us buy something new, something that's ours." Ours? I understood what that meant. Not mine. I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them tremble. "This house," I said slowly, "is already yours. I put it in your name years ago." He looked surprised. "I did not want you to struggle later," I explained. "I wanted you to be secure." His eyes softened for a moment. "Mom." "But," I added gently, "I thought I would always have a place here." He closed his eyes briefly. "You would," he said quickly. "Just maybe somewhere else, somewhere more comfortable." More comfortable. I looked around the small room I had moved into for them. The single bed, the small dresser, the thin curtains. I had already made myself smaller once. How much smaller could I become? Soft rain begins outside. Window close-up, slow fade. After that conversation, something shifted. Daniel became quieter. Claire became more distant. They began going to real estate viewings on weekends. They spoke in low voices about neighborhoods and schools. No one asked where I would go. One afternoon, I found a brochure on the kitchen counter. A modern house. Bright windows, clean walls, a large garden. No downstairs room. No spare space. Just 3 bedrooms. I picked it up carefully, as if it might break. When Daniel came home, I asked gently, "Is this the house you like?" He hesitated. "It's just an option." "It's beautiful," I said honestly. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Mom, we assumed you would maybe find a smaller apartment, somewhere close by." Assumed. I nodded slowly. "I see." That night, I lay awake again. I remembered the first time Daniel had a fever as a baby. I stayed up all night pressing cool cloths to his forehead. I remembered skipping meals so he could have seconds. I remembered sewing his school uniform by hand because I could not afford a new one. I never kept score. Love does not keep score. But lying there in the dark, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel before. I felt replaced. The final moment did not come with shouting. It came with paperwork. 2 weeks later, Daniel came downstairs with a folder in his hand. "Mom," he said softly, "we got an offer on the house." I nodded. "It's a good one," he continued. "We would need to move within 2 months." 2 months. He placed the folder on the table between us. "There are documents to sign." My name was still on some of the original mortgage papers. I looked at the pen beside the folder. So small. So ordinary. And yet it felt heavier than anything I had ever held. "Have you already decided?" I asked gently. He swallowed. "Yes." I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for the little boy who once held my skirt in the kitchen. I did not find him. I found a man, tired, conflicted, but determined. "I don't want you to think this means we don't love you," he said quickly. I gave him a small smile. "I know you love me." Love was never the question. It was space. It was priority. It was where I stood in his new life. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, but my voice stayed calm. "If this makes you happy," I said softly, "then I will sign." He looked relieved. Relieved. That was the moment my heart cracked, not because he wanted a new house, but because my leaving made things easier for him. I signed every page without reading twice. When I finished, I slid the folder back toward him. "There," I whispered. He stood up quickly and hugged me. "Thank you, Mom." His arms felt familiar, warm, strong. But something inside that embrace felt distant. Like he was already halfway somewhere else. Music lowers. Camera on empty kitchen chair. After he left the room, I stayed seated. I touched the table where he had placed the papers. I realized something quietly painful. I had spent my whole life building a home for my son. And now, I was the only thing that did not belong in it. That evening, Claire came downstairs. "I know this isn't easy," she said carefully. I nodded. "It's just healthier for everyone." "Healthier?" I smiled politely. "I hope the new house brings you peace." She seemed surprised by my calmness. Maybe she expected tears or anger. But mothers learn how to cry silently. Later that night, I went upstairs when they were out. I stood in the hallway. The walls still held old family photos. Daniel at 5 years old holding a toy truck. Daniel at graduation. Daniel at his wedding. I gently removed the frames and placed them in a box. If I was leaving, I wanted to take the memories with me. As I packed, I whispered softly into the quiet house. "I hope one day you understand." I was not speaking to Claire. I was speaking to my son. The house began to empty slowly. It did not happen all at once. It happened in small disappearances. First, the bookshelf in the living room. Then the dining table, where we had eaten together for years. Then the curtains I had washed every spring. Each time something left, the house felt lighter. And I felt heavier. Daniel and Claire were busy every day. Phone calls, meetings, boxes arriving, boxes leaving. Their voices carried excitement now. Plans for paint colors, garden ideas, new beginnings. I tried to match their energy. "That sounds lovely," I would say. "I'm happy for you." And I meant it. But happiness can live beside sadness. They do not cancel each other out. One afternoon, I began packing my own things. I did not have much. Some clothes. A small box of letters. Photo albums. Daniel's childhood, drawings that I had saved for years. I wrapped each memory carefully in newspaper, as if protecting something fragile. Because I was soft piano, close-up of hands folding old baby clothes, I found a tiny blue sweater at the bottom of my dresser drawer. Daniel wore it when he was 3. It still smelled faintly of lavender from years ago. I sat on the edge of the bed and held it to my chest. I remembered how small his hands were, how tightly he used to hold my finger when we crossed the street. "Don't let go, Mom," he would say. I never did. Until now, as moving day came closer, Daniel became more distant. Not cruel, not angry, just distracted. One evening, I tried to talk to him while he taped up a box. "Do you remember," I began softly, "the time we painted your room green because you said it made you feel brave?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I remember." "You hated it the next week," I added gently. He laughed, but it was quick, short. "Mom, can we talk later? I just need to finish this." Of course, I told myself, he's busy. There were many, later conversations that never came. Claire avoided eye contact most days. She was polite, always polite. But politeness is not warmth. It is distance wearing good manners. A week before the move, Daniel asked if I wanted to see the new house. I hesitated, but I agreed. We drove there in silence. It was beautiful, bright windows, fresh paint, clean floors, a small garden in the back. Claire walked through each room with pride. "This will be our bedroom," she said, "and this one will be the baby's someday." Baby. The word caught in my throat. Daniel glanced at me quickly, as if measuring my reaction. "That's wonderful," I said softly. I walked slowly through the house. There were 3 bedrooms. One for them. One for a future child. One for an office. No extra room. No small space downstairs. I understood without asking. On the drive back, Daniel cleared his throat. "We thought it might be easier if you moved into an apartment near your church," he said carefully. "You have friends there." Friends? Yes, I had acquaintances, familiar faces. But I had built my whole life around him. "I'll manage," I replied gently. He nodded, relieved again. Relief. I began to recognize that expression-moving day arrived with gray clouds. The house was full of strangers carrying boxes. Footsteps echoed through empty rooms. The walls looked larger without furniture. The air felt colder. I stood in the kitchen one last time. This was where Daniel did his homework, where we argued about curfews, where he told me about Claire for the first time. So many ordinary moments. And now just silence. Daniel came downstairs holding car keys. "The movers are almost done," he said. I nodded. My small suitcase was by the door. Everything else fit into 3 boxes. 3 boxes for a lifetime. Claire stepped outside to speak to one of the movers. Daniel and I were alone for a moment. I looked at him carefully. "Are you happy?" I asked. He paused. "Yes," he said after a second. That second felt longer than it should have. "I'm glad," I whispered. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "You'll be okay, Mom." It sounded like reassurance, but also like goodbye, slow fade to empty hallway, echoing footsteps. When the last box was carried out, I walked through the house once more. The bedrooms were bare. The living room echoed. I touched the wall near the staircase, where we had marked Daniel's height each year. Small pencil lines, dates written beside them. I ran my finger over the tallest mark. He was taller than me now, in more ways than one. I did not cry. Not yet. After the move, I stayed in a small rental apartment near the church. It was clean, quiet, simple. The first night there, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the silence. No footsteps above me. No doors closing. No familiar sounds. Just the hum of a refrigerator and the ticking of a clock. Daniel promised he would visit. The first week, he called twice. The second week, once. By the third week, only a short message. "Busy day, talk soon." I told myself this was normal. New house, new responsibilities, new life. Still, I waited. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to surprise them with homemade pie. I baked it slowly, carefully, like I used to. When I arrived at their new house, I noticed something small. The curtains were drawn. The garden was neat, perfect. I knocked. Claire opened the door halfway. "Oh," she said, surprised. "I brought pie," I smiled. She hesitated before opening the door fully. "Daniel's not home," she said. "That's all right," I replied. "I can wait." Her expression tightened slightly. "He's actually out of town for work." "Out of town." "He didn't mention that," I said quietly. She gave a small shrug. It was last minute. There was an awkward silence. "I should go," I said gently, handing her the pie. "You can tell him I stopped by." She nodded. I walked back to my car slowly. That evening, I called Daniel. "You're traveling?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yeah," he said. "It came up suddenly." I did not ask why he hadn't told me. I did not ask when he would return. Because sometimes the answer hurts more than the silence. 2 weeks later, Daniel came to my apartment. He stood in the doorway, looking around the small space. "It's nice," he said politely. Polite again. We sat at the tiny kitchen table. I made tea. He seemed restless. "I just came to say," he began slowly, "that things are going to be busy for a while. Claire's expecting." My breath caught. "Expecting." He nodded. "I wanted you to hear it from me." From him. I smiled through the sudden blur in my eyes. "That's beautiful news." He looked relieved. "I'm going to be a grandmother," I whispered. "Yes," he said softly. For a moment, warmth filled the room. But then he stood up quickly. "I should go. Claire's waiting." "So soon?" He walked toward the door. I followed. At the threshold, I opened my mouth to say something. Anything. "Stay a little longer." "Have dinner." "Sit with me." But the words did not come. He stepped outside. "Take care, Mom," he said. And then, he walked away. No hug. No, "I'll call tomorrow." No looking back. Just quiet footsteps down the hallway. The door closed gently. And I stood there with my hand, still resting on the handle. That was the moment. Not the house. Not the papers. Not the move. But that door closing without goodbye. After everything I gave him. He left without saying goodbye. Soft piano fades into silence. Camera lingers on closed door. I did not cry loudly. I sat at the table and folded my hands. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he loved me. I told myself this was just life moving forward. But deep inside, something fragile had finally broken. Not my love. Never that. But my place in his world. And in that quiet apartment, I finally understood something painful. Sometimes, we give our whole lives to raising someone. And one day, they grow into a life that no longer includes us the way we hoped. After Daniel left my apartment that day, I did not move for a long time. The tea between us had gone cold. His chair was still slightly pulled back from the table. I kept looking at it, almost expecting him to walk back in and say, "I forgot something." But he did not. The apartment felt smaller than before, not physically, but emotionally. I slowly washed the 2 cups in the sink. I dried them carefully and placed them back on the shelf. The simple act felt heavier than it should have. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about the word expecting. A baby. My grandchild. There was a time when Daniel could not sleep without holding my hand. Now he was going to hold someone else's tiny hand. And I was not sure if there would be space for mine. The days that followed were quiet. Daniel did not call. I did not call either. Not because I did not want to, but because I did not want to feel like I was asking for a place in his life. There is a strange kind of pain in realizing that love does not always guarantee closeness. I went to church on Sunday as usual. I smiled at familiar faces. I sang softly. I bowed my head when everyone else did. But inside I felt hollow. After the service, Mrs. Carter from the 3rd row touched my arm. "You look tired," she said gently. "I'm fine," I replied with a smile. And in that moment, I realized how easy it is to hide heartbreak when you are older. People assume you are simply quiet. They do not know you are grieving something that is still alive. One afternoon, I opened the box of old letters I had brought with me. Inside were birthday cards Daniel made when he was little, crooked handwriting, stick figures, hearts drawn in uneven shapes. One card said, "Mom, thank you for always being there." I traced the letters with my finger. Always being there. I began to ask myself something difficult. Had I made my whole world too small? For years, my life was Daniel, his school, his meals, his dreams, his future. I told myself that was love. And it was. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to build something that belonged only to me. When he grew into his own life, I felt like I had nothing left. That realization hurt. But it was honest. A few weeks later, Daniel finally called. "Mom," he said quickly, "sorry I haven't checked in. Things have been busy." Busy? I had learned that word well. "How are you feeling?" I asked gently. "How is Claire?" "She's tired, but okay." I hesitated before asking the next question. "Have you seen the doctor?" "Yes, everything's fine." There was a pause. "Mom, we've been thinking. Once the baby comes, things will be even more hectic. So if we don't visit often, please understand." Understand. I closed my eyes briefly. "I understand," I said. And I did. Understanding does not mean it does not hurt. It simply means you accept what is. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. Then I did something small but important. I took out a notebook, and I wrote my own name at the top of the page. Margaret. It had been a long time since I thought about myself as more than Mom. Next morning, I walked to the community center near my apartment. There was a sign outside. Volunteers needed, reading program for children. I stood there longer than necessary. Then I walked inside. A young woman greeted me warmly. "Are you here about volunteering?" she asked. "Yes," I said softly. I began reading to children twice a week. At first, my voice trembled, not from fear, but from memories. Reading stories reminded me of the nights I sat beside Daniel's bed. But something surprising happened. The children listened. They laughed. They asked questions. One little boy tugged at my sleeve after a session. "Can you read again tomorrow?" he asked. And for the first time in months, I felt needed in a way that did not hurt. Needed, not as someone's shadow, not as someone's past, but as myself. I began baking again, Not for Daniel, not to bring somewhere I was unsure I belonged, but for the neighbors in my building. Mrs. Patel across the hall loved apple pie. The young couple downstairs appreciated fresh bread. Slowly, faces became names. Names became conversations. One evening, I realized something simple. My heart still had room. It had been bruised, yes, but not empty. The call came late at night. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice shaky. "It's a girl. A girl." I felt tears slip down my face before I could stop them. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Is Claire okay?" "Yes, they're both okay." There was silence on the line. "Would you like to come tomorrow?" he asked. The question felt fragile, as if it could disappear if I moved too quickly. "I would love to," I replied. When I walked into the hospital room, Claire looked exhausted. But when she placed the baby in my arms, something shifted. The tiny bundle stirred softly. Small fingers, warm skin, a faint scent of new life. I looked at her and felt something I had not felt in a long time. "Hope." Daniel stood beside me. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. I smiled. For a moment, there was no tension, no distance, just 3 generations standing in a small hospital room. And I understood something important. Life does not move backward. It moves forward. And sometimes our place changes, but it does not disappear. In the weeks after the baby came home, I did not force my presence. I waited to be invited. Sometimes they called, sometimes they did not. But I stopped measuring love by frequency. I stopped counting visits. Instead, I focused on what I could control. My kindness, my patience, my own life. One afternoon, Daniel came by unexpectedly. He looked tired, overwhelmed. "I don't know how you did this alone," he admitted quietly, speaking about the baby. I smiled gently. "You just do it," I said, "because you love them." He looked at me differently then. Not as someone in the way. Not as someone to move aside. But as someone who had walked this road before him. "I'm sorry if I made you feel pushed out," he said softly. The words were not dramatic, but they were real. I reached for his hand. "You were building your life," I replied. "That's what I raised you to do." And in that moment, I meant it fully. Forgiveness did not come in one wave. It came in small breaths. In choosing not to replay old hurts. In choosing to see his struggle as well as my own. I am still in my small apartment. It is still quiet at night. But the silence no longer feels heavy. It feels peaceful. On the wall, I have a new photo now. Daniel holding his daughter. Claire smiling softly. And me standing beside them. Not at the center, but not outside either. Just present. Sometimes I still think about that day. He walked away without saying goodbye. And yes, it still stings a little. But I have learned something. Children do not leave because they stop loving us. They leave because they are meant to build something new. And if we love them truly, we must allow that. After everything I gave him, he left without saying goodbye. But in the end, I realized something deeper. I did not give him everything so he would stay. I gave him everything so he could go. And that is the quiet strength of a mother's love. Sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window in my small apartment and watch the streetlights glow. The world feels quiet at that hour. Cars pass slowly. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere a television hums behind closed curtains. And I think about the journey of being a mother. No one tells you that motherhood has seasons. There is the season when little feet run toward you. When small hands reach up. When your name is called from another room 20 times a day. "Mom, Mom, Mom," and you answer every time. Then there is another season. The footsteps grow heavier, the voice grows deeper. The child begins to close their door, not out of anger, just out of growing. And one day, the door closes behind them as they step into a life of their own. If you are not careful, that silence can feel like rejection. I felt that silence. I felt it in the empty kitchen, in the untouched cup of tea, in the gentle click of the door that morning, when Daniel walked away without looking back. For a long time, I asked myself what I had done wrong. Did I love too much? Did I stay too close? Did I forget to let him breathe? But slowly, with time and quiet reflection, I understood something important. Love is not proven by how tightly we hold on. It is proven by how gently we let go. I did not raise my son to remain small. I raised him to stand on his own feet. I did not sacrifice so he would stay beside me forever. I sacrificed so he would have the strength to build something beyond me. And building something new often requires space. Space can feel cold at first, but space is also where growth happens. Today, when I hold my granddaughter in my arms, I do not feel replaced. I feel continued. I see pieces of Daniel in her smile. I see small reflections of myself in the way she frowns when she concentrates. Life did not remove me. It repositioned me. I am no longer the center of his world. And that is not a failure. That is the natural rhythm of love. There are still days when I miss the old house, the pencil marks on the wall, the sound of Daniel laughing in the kitchen. Memories do not disappear. They soften. They settle gently instead of cutting sharply. If you are listening to my story and you feel forgotten, I want you to pause for a moment. Breathe. You are not forgotten. You are transitioning. There is a difference. Sometimes the role changes before the heart is ready. But hearts can adjust. We are stronger than we think. I have learned to fill my days with purpose again, to read stories to children who wait for my voice, to bake bread not because someone expects it, but because I enjoy the warmth of the oven. I have learned to say my own name without feeling guilty. Margaret, not just Mom. And yet, I will always be Mom. That part of me does not disappear simply because the house is quieter. If I could go back to that morning, the untouched tea, the closed door, I would tell myself something softly. He is not leaving you. He is walking toward his future. And I would remind myself that love does not end when someone walks away without saying goodbye. Sometimes, goodbye is not spoken because life moves too fast. But love remains in the quiet spaces between visits, between phone calls, between generations. After everything I gave him, he left without saying goodbye. And still, I would give it all again. Because love given freely is never wasted. It grows in ways we cannot always see. And in the end, the greatest strength is not holding on. It is loving deeply, standing gently, and allowing life to unfold. That is the quiet courage of a mother's heart. And that is enough.